G'day and welcome back to my workbench, and we have the St. Louis up and I'm going to finish some rigging on it. And as you know, if you've watched my channel, I started doing all the Deadeye rigging and I did it in a new way. Well, it sort of started with the Bounty because I am not a fan of these sort of plastic ratlines, you know. They look awful. They're rather drivel. If you're a first-time modeler and you're just building ships, sure, okay. You know, I did too. Back in the 60s, yeah, I used the plastic ones. It was an easy way to do things. And then Airfix came along and they produced these, which seemed like a much better solution. And this gives you the shrouds and the ratlines. They're already moulded for you. In fact, this is some sort of fiberglass and it's covered with plastic. But it tends to be a little inaccurate and blobby and it's not consistent and you get all kinds of horrible sort of glitches. So, yeah, and it's not that easy to sort of tie to your model. Well, it doesn't look as good as you think it would. So I went a step further and I went, well, I want to actually sort of, you know, tie my shrouds to the model. And in the Bounty, I used the plastic Deadeyes with the channels in them. And I just tied off my shroud lines to those. And that worked well. That gave me a much better look. And then I invented this tool, which I called the Rat Harp. And this allowed me to put the ratlines, which are the horizontal ones, across it. Right, here's a pick. And then push it up, spring set, and glue them to the shrouds. Now, this is sort of similar to how the Heller rigging tool works, right? But the Heller rigging tool is fixed to very limited sort of sizing. But as far as accuracy for the height of the ratlines, I mean, it's way out. It compromises all over the place. And even its spacing across the channel board is at best a weird approximation. Now, I know we're working with scale models here, but I feel we can get closer, and especially, you know, a lot of the problems in small plastic scale models, they're not easy to solve. When you get to the bigger wooden ships, sure, you can pretty well rig them almost like they do real ships, and that's where you use your wood Deadeyes, right? And you rig it all up exactly the same method and the rest of it, and that's fine. But these small scale plastic ships, it's too hard. So that's where the Rat Harp came to be a brilliant solution, and that has grown and adapted to the point where I've made bigger and better ones, and now I sell them all around the world. And I've even made them up to, you know, Victory size, which is huge. In fact, I even made some that only just fit on my 3D printer, and they for the Tamiya 156 scale America yacht. Now you notice there's something new down the bottom here. One of the problems that I had when I was doing the ratlines, especially when I started doing wooden Deadeyes, was trying to get a consistent length or spacing between the channels, right? So between each Deadeye, right, there's channel lines. So I sort of messed around with some jigs and things, trying to work out a way to consistently space them. So this resulted in the Deadbug, yeah, which is basically just a spacing tool so that you can get the Deadeyes, click them in, run the channels, and then you can make as many as you want. You can do 2 pairs at a time. And it's a quick way to get all the Deadeyes together. But there's a problem. There's a problem because as you go along in a run, okay, it starts out vertically, but then it becomes an angle. Now, this is not so much a problem in a small scale model, and I even got away with it over here on the St. Louis for the foremast. But when you get to like a Victory here, which is a lot bigger, and this is the mainmast, well, that is a big difference between there and there. You've got about a 2mm difference almost. So if you rig them all at the same length, right, then the whole Deadeye arrangement starts to droop. And a lot of guys will complain, well, that's not going to work, Harry. That's going to be a disaster. And they're quite right. So I thought about it, and I came up with this, which is a dead run. And the dead run solves that whole problem because it takes into account the vertical and then the angled spacing, and you can put all your Deadeyes in and you can rig them all up in one go and then put it straight on the model, or you can even put it on the Rat Harp and rig your shrouds and all the rest of it. Does that sound interesting? Would you like to see how my dead run works and how easy it is to use to get a whole run done in one go, quickly, accurately, and very easily? Okay then, let's roll the music. Alright, how does this dead run work and what's it all about? Well, it's just simply a whole lot of sort of dead bugs, one after the other, but as I said, it takes into account the diagonals, and so therefore this length is longer than this length, which solves those sort of problems. Plus it lets you hold them all in a jig, which makes life so much easier, and then you can run the channels through. And I will show you that clearly in a sec, as I've done in previous videos when I showed how to use the dead bow. Now, one word of warning, these holes are designed for 5mm deadeyes on this one here for Victory, and they have a tolerance of 0.1mm, and that works fine as long as your deadeyes are exactly 5mm. But what happens is, and I found when I was trying to do 3.5mm sort of little dead runs, right, tiny little ones for up higher on the mast. Now, these Artesina Latana ones, right, they range anything from 3.7 to 3.9, and they're supposed to be a 3.5. So this becomes a problem. They don't fit. So I have solutions around that. One is you can use a round file into your jig, right? And you can slightly widen it. It's only like 0.5mm or so. You can just adjust. Or, as I have done here, you'll see there's a piece of tape on there, right? So the piece of tape holds in any loose deadeyes. So that is another solution. However, there's a third solution, and it's coming soon. I'm still experimenting with it, but it works well. These are 3D printed deadeyes, right? But they're made out of wood filament. These are actually wood, right? And they simply snap off this thing and they trim up very quickly. And I hope to be able to do a sort of maybe a run of 64 of these for $10. They'll be that cheap. So that'll make it a lot more affordable to buy a whole lot of deadeyes for your kit, and you'll know they will fit exactly into your dead run. Now look at this dead run. You'll see here I've got some of my 3D printed deadeyes in, right? And they look a little bit different, okay? But if we came across to here, these all look the same, don't they? No, they're not. See these two? We flip it over. That one is 3D printed. And the only way that you can tell is that the triangular spacing between the holes is perfect. And these are printed ones as well, but they are just plastic. I wanted to see if you could just do them out of some plastic. And I will be probably offering some styrene ones as well, because I've been working out trying to get the face smooth and make them less look like a 3D printed thing, but a nice smooth printed part. So that's the thing. I will soon be offering those, and they are perfect. If they're 5mm, they are 5mm. They fit exactly into my dead run. But anyhow, you're probably working with wooden deadeyes, that's fine. If they're a bit too big, yours, right, file it out. If they're a little bit too small, you use the tape method. In fact, the tape method is still a good idea. Now, I often just run it on the top and the bottom, not in the middle where you're going to rig the channels. And it easily peels off afterwards, believe me. I'll show you that. But it's interesting that I could paint. All I used was a little bit of Life Color Wood Deck Shadower, which I use on my ships to do the wood effects, and there's also a Wood Deck Darkener. One dab of each on my wood printed Deadeye, and it looked exactly the same colour. Now, if you're doing the Victory, you probably want all these black anyway, so that might be a thing to consider, is to get some sort of dark, sort of lamp black sort of wash, and wash all your Deadeyes in lamp black, which means, again, if you use the wooden ones that I print, they'll look exactly the same. Now, another feature that you don't see on the front of my dead run, and it isn't on the dead bug, right? The dead bug on the back of it, it's just plain. The idea is you just rig your channels, and then you have to attach your shrouds and your chain plates, right? I have developed this so that you can actually have the shrouds on there. They can be rigged to your deadeyes, right? And you notice this very heavily engineered and super complicated fixing method? Yeah, rubber band. I tried all kinds of clamping methods and the rest of it. They all seem so complicated. And plus it meant I'd have to make millions of versions of tools with all different sort of studs and holes and clicky points. And I went, hang on, what if I put a rubber band on it? And that works perfectly because there are teeth in the Rat Harp. More of that later. So yes, you can have your shroud rigged with its bit of binding there. And you can have your chain plate rigged. Again, if you're using wire or something around your deadeyes, then you might have to file out the holes in here a bit because the wire might expand it. I'm going to do my bottom deadeyes with cordage. I'm going to use super glue to bind the two cords that come off the bottom, and that's going to be my pretend chain plate at this scale because I've tried the wire. It's okay, but it's just too big and unwieldy for 1/44 scale. Now you may notice on this one for Victory, well, why did I put those plastic ones in there? Well, they're spacers. Because you see, any set and run of Deadeyes always has gaps, usually for cannons or, could be any kind of sort of protuberance on the side of the hull, and the Deadeyes will have to work around that. So for the Victory, in the Heller mode, because this is the design for the Heller one, it had three, this is backwards. Harry, you put it on backwards. Now, if this was round right way, Harry, it has 3, 4, 2, 1 and 2. Somehow in a demo I've rigged it backwards, but there you go. Get it round the right way. So it should have started, that should be the vertical, that should be the diagonal, but anyhow, it's just showing spacing. It's just an example. Don't nitpick me on it. So the idea is you then space. So I figured at most you'd need probably 4 spaces for a Victory. So you can basically rig any pattern you like to fit your model, when ships were rigged differently over the years anyway. So there's flexibility in my dead run. You can get various rigging styles, as long as it's not more than 4 spaces, which I figured there wouldn't be. Similarly, as you go up, and this is what the short one here is for, right? This is the short dead run. This is for the upper mast, right? The second layer. Okay. So you can rig those as well using my dead run. And it allows for whatever number I see as probably the maximum. Usually the upper ones don't have spacing, right? So you don't need that many. Probably 5 is all you need. But I've added an extra couple just for the odd occasions when you might need to angle it. This is the thing, your first line may not be vertical. This is the thing. It might need to go back a couple and be slightly angled. So I've allowed for that. So you have all the versatility you need to get the Deadeyes in the correct position at the correct angle, and away you go. And as you can see, you can add them to your Rat Harp while you're actually setting them up and run the shrouds, and that will help tension everything, and you can really get a feel for how it's coming together. You can then even, in theory, add the ratlines over the top and glue it all in situ and cut it away. Although I'd only recommend that when you're doing the short ones that go up the top, because they're so short, and as I've shown in previous videos, you can't really get the Rat Harp in the top of the mast. So that proves a problem. And I showed a way using a rubber band, a bit of mucking around to actually produce the whole rig with the ratlines off the model. This is far more efficient. Now you can use your short run. So let me rig one of these and show you every single part of the process so you can get an idea how it works. Now, it may be possible to actually rig the whole thing on the model with the dead run and the Rat Harp, but it's really quite fiddly, especially like this when you want to put spacings in and everything. Quite frankly, it's better to use that as a template, do your shrouds, and then bring them into the model afterwards and tie them off at exactly the right spots, right? You'll get the exact spacing you want. And it's really not that hard down here on the lower section. So, you can try it, but I think it becomes too fiddly. What this does solve, though, is when we get to these top part of the mast, right? So we've already done the rat lines below, need to do the top part of the mast, and we bring in our Rat Harp, and it may fit, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it just doesn't. It's just a bit of a problem. Anyway, it might take a lot of pinning or messing around to actually get it to sit in place. Luckily, mine is wide enough for this particular kit, and it can get in there, but sometimes you get a problem where you can't get it around the tops here, right? So the little fighting platforms, you cannot get the Rat Harp in, so you have a problem. Now when this happens, the solution is to rig it off the model. Now I did show a method in the last video that required lots of rubber bands. Well, the rubber bands are back, but it's much easier. This is the short dead run. So when you put that in place, see, it's just on the platform and it touches the top there. So you have a little triangle here that you can rig, and you can do it off the model, and it's really easy. And you can also work out where do you want to put your Deadeyes, as I said before, do they stagger back? You find out where the spot is here. Usually it'll be straight up and down, right? So usually it'll be like that, and you'll just have to work out your angle, and you adjust the little dead run until you've got the shape that you want. Once you've got that, and you double check it by actually measuring those, I would highly recommend you put a rule up here and measure that, and then confirm that distance back on here. Once you're all measured up and you're set, Well, it's just a matter of putting in your Deadeyes and lashing everything together, and away you go. Bingo bongo, how hard can it be? Now, to get started, we need to measure the base of our run of Deadeyes, and you probably should have done this before you even sort of started, messing around with the model. Certainly should have drilled those holes before you did all this, Harry, but anyhow. Already prepared a whole lot of Deadeyes here, and I've made ones with a long run, which is just long enough to get from the fighting platform there up to the top of that top mast. And first of all, I had a problem. My usual method of putting the Deadeyes in the top is just not working. It's these 3.5s that are actually 3.7 to 3.9. They're just oversized. And by the time I've added the shroud around, they're just not fitting. It's really proving a bit of a problem. I found if you went in through the bottom, it was a lot easier. So that was a different trick. So go in through the bottom, do them upside down to how you would do a dead bug. If you're used to doing dead bug, upside down. Now, some of them are just not going to fit, so I needed to bore them out. The better trick with this is to use the 4mm dead run and use the sticky tape method where you put them in and then they're a little bit loose and you tape them into position. But I persevered here because I'm a stubborn old bugger, and I kept popping them in and getting annoyed and finding they didn't fit, getting upset and getting the trial. Yes, there was a few words and Bastacat ran out of the room. But, this is all part of modelling and you can fiddle around with it. So eventually they all go in and you end up with the setup that you need. More filing, more running. This will all be fixed when you use the 4mm run. Yeah, so for 3.5mm Deadeyes, use the 4mm run and it will fit a lot better. Okay, let's wax up a bit of cordage here in the jute colour, because this is going to form our channels. Using a wide mouth beading needle. Talked about those in other videos. They are really good because now I can start threading through. Very first one needs a knot. Now I've shown all this in detail before in the video about how to use the dead bug. Alright, so probably leave a link at the end of this video so you can go back and watch that. But just so you can get a quick idea, you rig your channels on the jig. You just rig them through. You've got to go from bottom left to top left, and then you run it around the back and diagonally through to the top center one, and then away you go. And then eventually when they're all through, tie it off, and I usually just add a little dab of glue. If you're good, you can run it up to the top and bind it and do it all correct as per the book. But this is so small at the scale, you really, doing those sort of things is a waste of time, never be seen. Alright, so I've made my way through, and this is the last run. So you can see clearly here, it's just a matter of sewing, threading everything through. So it's pretty easy, really. Once you get a sort of rhythm of it, it's not hard at all. Especially if you only got 4 pairs to do here, it's not hard. So get the last one, thread it through, there she is. They are done. Now, we need to measure the height from the platform to the other platform, right? Which is going to be our length of our ratlines. So we know it's 85 for this one, 86. So I measure that off on my Rat Harp. It just happens it's from hole to hole. That's what the little holes are for. They might actually fit the lengths that you need. I've sort of guessed a lot of them. Right, to rig a Rat Harp with the ratlines, that's the first thing we do. This is the same as I've shown in rigging the Rat Harp videos, and I'll leave links for those at the end as well, which is simply tie it off on the top and then making sure you're staying level with the notches all the way through. So this means your lines will be level when you basically put the shrouds over the top. If you don't, they'll end up wobbly or they could fan out. So I've gone down there just near where that line is, but now I need to check how high are the Deadeyes. And I've done too many. I just need to cap off a couple. Right, now if I put my Deadeyes in, they'll match up to that line. That's it. So then I wind off the waist to the bottom and I tie it off through the hole down there. That's what those holes are for. Yes. So once that's tied off, it's all done. It's time now to start putting on the dead run. Now it has a wonderful little mechanism here called a rubber band. And you can make this tighter by double winding it, all that sort of thing. Right, now it's best to have the rubber band off as you put it on. You can try and push it on from the bottom, but it often doesn't work. So get it in position and you line it up as sort of roughly to the bottom of the lowest shroud line there. Now remember, it's the shroud line on the other side, not the shroud line on the back. Shroud lines on the back will be a different angle. Now it needs to be spaced about a dead eye away, so that's sort of how it usually works, but You check with your model because each rigging's differing, and you had binding there. If it was down the bottom and you had binding, you probably need about 2 or 3 lengths of Deadeye because that's all a binding. Now we start adding the shrouds into the little hole up there, but to make sure that things don't get pulled out of shape, I'm now adding a couple more rubber bands, linking them in to these slots, and that just gives enough strength. Like, you don't need much. This whole thing is really, it's not super sprung, it's just tight, just gently tight. Okay? Alright, it's just a matter now of taking each of those shrouds and sticking them through the hole at the top. See? The holes have meaning. And away we go. Through they go. Lining them up, trying to keep them nice and separate. Now we need to make sure the shrouds don't come loose. I tried using a peg, but it doesn't hold very well. Forceps seem to be the best thing, and they hold them in place. We also need to make sure that none of them are sort of twisted over. So we do that, and now we are rigged and ready to glue. Now I'm going to glue the ratlines to the shrouds, and to that I'm going to use some white wood glue. I use Selleys Aquid here. It's terrific stuff, but you can use whatever wood glue you can find. You might need to thin it out so that it flows nicely, but it will glue this up beautifully. If you see my other videos, you know exactly what we're going to do now. Now I've only glued to there because that top bit was left so that the footocks can come down, of course. So we'll just start trimming. Here we go. Right, we release the string, or the shrouds, and lo and behold, it's all rigged. And very carefully, take off our rubber bands. Look at that. It's just sitting nice and straight. Perfect. Now we've got to pop these out. Now, unlike when you do them in the dead bug, normally in the dead bug you go around the back and push them through. These, of course, were put in from the bottom. That's so that we can get all these lines sitting in the little grooves and things. So I take this very, very sophisticated tool. Oh, it's just anything that comes to hand, and pop, 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 and making sure that none of your lines get tangled. Now there could be a little bit of glue here. Okay. And voila, we have a fully rigged set of ratlines which will fit perfectly, we hope, on our model. So let's do that. Now, trying to keep this shape as much as possible, we will attempt to thread the little shroud lines through the holes I've already pre-drilled. Now we'll secure those guys in with a little bit of CA glue because they're sitting nicely, but we just need to make sure they're rotated correctly. So we want to rotate this one round to there, pull it down, and then lock it in the hole. With the lower section secured in place, or at least the first one, I think it's sort of better you just do the first one. Then we need to find that shroud. Should be fairly easy. It will be this one. And that's the one you want to run up here through that hole that I custom put in this thing. This little fighting top here. And then we can pull it through. So that line is now through and it's friction tight. And the Deadeye is tight, so we're ready to go. I'll just finish those off because they are kind of fiddly. I did have to scrape a little bit out of the space there between the two masts there where they join. And that's it. Once they're in, glue them down, bingo bongo, you're done. So there you have it, the final result. And I think that looks pretty good. My only main criticism is these Deadeyes are too big. They really are. They're supposed to be 3.5s and really they're closer to 4s, and I struggle to try and fit them in the dead run. It's just a problem. I would replace those with 3mm diameter Deadeyes, and I wouldn't go and buy them, no, because after all the variation in size is ridiculous. I'm going to wood print my own 3mm Deadeyes and replace this. So for the moment, this is just friction fit, but you get the final result. So we have gone from rigging something on the dead run, connecting it to the Rat Harp, and then stringing it all up, and that is the final result. Buttons, 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 as always, buttons in my life. I am surrounded by buttons. I'm like a haberdashery of scale modelling. Yes, and if you really want to help me out, you can always buy me a curry. Yes, please, do that. Alright, well that's all I've got to say in this video. I hope that was instructive. There'll probably be questions, and that's great. I've been playing with this so long, I pretty well have the solutions for most sort of problems or issues or things you might be of concern. I've probably solved it. And on that note, we'll end the video. It's goodbye from Australia, and it's hooroo from Harry Houdini. This Bass gets a bit of Bass, put that cordage down. That's the shroud cord. Bass, put that cordage down. I need to get that done now.